Watching Kimanti Mutua's video, we realize that transformation is an impressive journey. While you may think that transformation is a unit shift to a regulated for-profit status, in reality it is not so simple. In this video, I will provide you with more information on the complexity of what is meant by transformation. In all cases, transformation cannot be reduced to one single event, the day when the non-regulated NGO became regulated. Instead, a series of changes occur before this regulatory change. It is a process. The regulation step is one of the last steps of the transformation process. In a paper co-authored with Céline Louche, we have tried to classify these steps. The first step in the transformation movement is to go from a project within an NGO to an independent organization. Microfinance activities often start as a project within an NGO. For example, the NGO Food for the Hungry started what is now FOLO, a regulated microfinance institution in Kenya. The second step is to move from an NGO to a company limited by shares, or a non-banking financial institution. That is a financial institution that doesn't have a full banking license and is not or less strictly supervised by a national or international banking regulatory agency. They can have very limited banking activities, mainly lending. This organizational form is flexible enough to keep the activity and functioning of the organization as it was, with few requirements. Non-banking financial institutions, as opposed to NGOs, are income-generating organizations, meaning that they are expected and supposed to create financial value. At this stage, we see that many FFIs decide to keep an NGO next to the financial institution. Sometimes this NGO only acts as a shareholder of the new entity, protecting the original social value. In other cases, the NGO has some concrete activities, for instance non-financial activities. In the case of KREP, managers and board members even decided to create a consulting body next to the original NGO and the regulated financial institution. Doing these first two steps, the organization is building competencies and skills to become closer to what is expected by regulators for a financial institution, to act more efficiently and more professionally. It is also during this period that they start to train their employees and recruit staff with more advanced computer skills, accounting or technical financial skills. The next step is rather determinant in the process of transformation and an important step towards commercialization, implying significant cultural changes in the organization. It consists of having shareholders. It first starts with one shareholder, which is usually one of their partners or the founding NGO, and then moves to multiple shareholders. Multiple shareholders often means international investors, often for-profit investors, or socially responsible investment funds. Finally, the last step is regulation as a deposit-taking institution or microfinance bank. It is, however, interesting to note that although regulation could in theory happen at any stage of the transformation process, it is usually the last step in the process. As noted by one of the interviewees, regulation by a supervisory authority is a big change. We now understand that transformation is therefore a more complex process than what has usually been presented by some of its proponents. MFI may not go through all these steps. However, what we see is that most of the time, except in some very rare cases, MFI are not transformed at once. Some microfinance actors are very positive about the process and consider that microfinance transformation is a bit like the development of humankind. The best image to illustrate the vision is the famous ape-to-man image, where the original project would be the early stage and the fully regulated institution would be the upright man. But others are less enthusiastic about the failed process because of the management implication that we will describe later this week. Let's now look at the institutional changes. When we talk about a transformation, it means that there was something before the regulated organization. And this was a non-profit organization, most of the time an NGO. The NGO is thus the historical organization, which has some staff and some know-how in microfinance. I just want to warn you that the fact that these are not-for-profit organizations doesn't mean that non-profit don't actually have positive profits. In fact, many microfinance NGOs make some profits and many reinvest these profits into the daily operations of their organization. Most of the time, transformation involves the creation of a new regulated financial institution that would be for-profit. There are thus two entities, and the original NGO would remain, take some shares in the institution, and receive some dividends from the new financial institution. In exchange, the NGO brings its staff and know-how in microfinance. The regulated MFI is thus most of the time partly owned by the NGO so that the for-profit MFI could give dividends to the NGO. The NGO may focus on the most social activities, such as non-financial services, or even just act as a shareholder without concrete activities. This separation of two entities may take a lot of time to be operationalized. Famous cases are Banco Sol in Bolivia or Banco Compartamos in Mexico. In some other cases, transformation happens in another way. The original NGO decides to change its status and become a regulated entity. Most of the time, this means becoming a for-profit organization. At the end of the transformation, the NGO doesn't exist anymore. There is just one entity at the end. As we reach the end of this video, I guess a lot of the concepts may be difficult to grasp right away. Take your time to understand them, since it is crucial to understanding the rest of the material for this week. Think about a few questions. What happens before a microfinance pilot project is able to apply for a banking or microfinance license? Do remember also the institutional structure of transformation, the complex cohabitation between the original NGO and the new regulated financial institutions. This is obviously an original situation. An NGO sets up a for-profit entity that it will partly own. This is also a terrific management challenge. We will now analyze the transformation from this management perspective.